6:31. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Well, you're not, because they're not here. This is Paul and Ellie. We're keeping their seats warm for them.
Yes, so let's take a look at the front pages, shall we? The Mirror has an exclusive. Firefighters at the Grenfell Tower blaze have since been diagnosed with cancer after breathing in toxic fumes from the blaze.
The Daily Mail leads with a change in NHS guidelines, which means GPs can now prescribe life-saving statins to prevent thousands of heart attacks and strokes. That's on loads of the front pages, actually, this morning.
The Guardian goes with Health Secretary Steve Barclay privately admitting he will need to increase the pay offer to NHS workers, though the Treasury warns he'll have to find the funds from the existing budget.
The Eye has an exclusive. Being homeless may have contributed to the deaths of at least 34 children between 2019 and 2022.
The Telegraph's lead story regards a ban on new gas boilers in an attempt for the government to reach net zero within the next decade.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is broadcaster Liz Kershaw and senior reporter for the Eye newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth. Brilliant to have you both with us this morning. Benjamin, let's start with you, shall we? In this story in The Independent, record 12-hour waits before being admitted to hospital. This is a special investigation, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and sadly it's not a good story at all, but I think it's one that won't surprise a lot of people. It's found that 54,000 people waited more than 12 hours at A&E. And A&Es are a pretty tough place at the best of times. So you can imagine, that means a lot of people sat there all through the night. Of the 2.2 million people that went to A&E during this time frame, half of them waited more than 4 hours. Now, 4 hours is the target that you're meant to be seen in. And you think about the kind of conditions that people end up in accident and emergency with, often things that maybe they should have been seen by their GP. And it's clearly an absolute nightmare. In fact, one of the most concerning parts of this independent report is that they think 500 deaths a week are coming as a consequence of the inefficiencies and the massive problems in the NHS. It says that 14,000 patients were stuck in hospital waiting last Sunday. I mean, it's a pretty damning report. And, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, was asked last Sunday whether he thought the NHS was experiencing a crisis this winter, and he refused to accept that it was. He refused to use the word. I think a lot of those people that have been having those experiences would definitely call that a crisis. I mean, if you have a heart attack, the average wait time for an ambulance is 90 minutes. That's not much use to you.
No, really shocking.
The target's 7 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's really time critical if you've got a heart attack or stroke, because the outcome can be so different depending on how immediately you get treated.
Yeah.
But there was a programme on ITV last night, When Can I See My GP, Please?
Yeah.
Did you see it?
No.
It's worth watching. It was on quite early, about 7:30.
The question should be, can I speak to my GP first?
One person
speak to anyone.
had rung 200 times, the old routine, ring at 8. And so people who are not able to see a GP are presenting themselves with the only available place to have an into the NHS, which is A&E. But I just wondered when I saw that, of the 54,000, the figure I'd really like to know is how many of those people who waited over 12 hours survived. In other words, how did that translate into mortality? Because we've had the highest mortality rate in the last 12 months since 1952.
Yeah, you're talking about excess deaths.
Excess deaths, yeah. And there's one place in the country where they're turning a shed that's meant to store salt for the roads into a temporary mortuary.
Yeah.
People are just dying.
Yeah. So how much do you think the state of the NHS contributes towards those excess deaths?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how confident do you feel about getting the... I think it's actually terrifying to think that yourself or someone you care about could die on the floor of the house because they were waiting for an ambulance.
Yeah.
I mean, or you parliament your own car, as I was told to do before the pandemic, when my friend fell in my kitchen, cracked her head and was unconscious, and I was told, oh, can you put her in the car and bring her along yourself? Even years ago, when one of my children was really poorly, it turned out he had bacterial meningitis, which Jeff Beck died from this week. Again, really time critical. And I kept ringing for an ambulance, and in the end I said, I'm not trying to order a bloody pizza, and went up in the car myself. So it's not a new thing, but it is, the whole thing is just terrifying, from the GP situation to A&E to trying to chuck people out of hospital to put them in hotels or care homes. By the way, I think we all have a responsibility, because what this programme brought out last night, guess how many appointments in the NHS were made last year where people just simply didn't turn up?
I don't know, go on.
14 million.
Yeah.
14 million wasted appointments.
Yeah. And the point has been made that if you charge the fee, as they do in places like Sweden, then you think more about going or making the appointment.
It's like a free bar at a wedding. If it's free, you just keep going up and ordering stuff, and you don't really need it or want it. At the end of the night, when they're clearing up, there's loads of half-full glasses with fag ends in. If you have to buy a drink, you
well, that's
go
different,
carefully.
isn't it?
The problem is, after the free bar, that's when you end up in A&E.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well,
Especially if you drink something with a fag end floating in it.
Yes, should we stay with a medical story now? Slightly more positive one, though. This is in the Mail. Well, depending on what you think, really. Handing out statins on demand, that's what doctors are being told. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so statins have always been for older people who, you know, maybe potentially a heart attack or stroke, potential sufferer, and bringing down your blood pressure and all the rest of it, your arteries flaring up. But now they'll be given out to anybody who wants it and demands them. There's so much stuff on offer from the NHS, like this now, like I've mentioned before on here, bowel cancer test, why don't you come and have a cervical smear test, why don't you come and have your breasts examined? And you think, they're not, are they sitting there touting for custom? Try and get an appointment when there's something wrong. It just doesn't weigh up. On the subject of statins, I'd say, I know people who've taken them and had bad side effects. I would say it would be far better if we could persuade the population to eat more healthily, shed the pounds. Lifestyle, because you'd no point being obese and taking statins.
Yeah.
Pills are no substitute for the kind of healthy lifestyles Benjamin and I
Well, I was going to say, Ben, where do you come on the healthy lifestyle scale?
I attempted to go vegan in November, and I haven't been doing it completely. It would be a lie to claim I have. But do you know what? Eating a lot more, I mean, it's so basic, isn't it? But eating a lot more vegetables and fruit has had a much bigger effect on my quality of life than I expected. I have more energy, I sleep better. And I actually, recently, a few months ago, I interviewed the oldest person in the country, the last Edwardian still alive.
Wow.
And so I looked up, 113. She'll be 114 in a couple of months.
Wow.
She was born under the King's great-great-grandfather. To put in context how incredibly old that is. But I looked up about what makes people live to be a super centenarian over 110. And more than your genetics, it is your weight.
Really?
And so your weight has a bigger effect on your life expectancy than your lineage, which is about a 25% chance, while your weight's about a third influence.
Did you talk to her about that? I mean, did she?
I did, and she's been the same weight pretty much all her life since she was a teenager, which is very slim. And now there are clearly going to be other factors in how she lived quite so long. But that is the key to having a long life as well as a quality of life. You know, I know lots of older people will often talk about how they lose weight and their hips and their joints are aching. The effect that it has on that is huge. And so, you know, it feels kind of basic, but COVID, again, we know that after sort of age, one of the biggest effects on mortality was if you were overweight. I think, you know, statins, I think, are very cheap, which is why the NHS has decided to encourage them.
Well, it's easy to pop a pill rather than take control of it. I mean, like you say, you'd save money and resources on hip replacements, knee replacements, and also I read an article this week about the effects on your brain of what you eat, the chemicals in it, etc. And, you know, the Mediterranean diet, there's a lot more research into it now. In the Mediterranean diet, there is evidence to show it helps your cognitive skills as you get older, because certain foods, like highly processed foods, which not only make you fat, they poison you in that they cause inflammation in the brain. So there's so many reasons to look after yourself before you take medicines.
I think I find the most difficult thing is sugar and salt, because they're put in a lot of foods and they're highly addictive. So that's often quite a problem.
I used to eat so much McDonald's and so much fast food, and I tell you what blows my mind is that you can consume all these calories and still be hungry and be lethargic. And you think, what on earth is in some of those foods? And I got hooked on McDonald's. There's no doubt. I was an addict. I constantly wanted burgers and nuggets. Yeah. And there's obviously something not ideal for you that's going on in those.
There's no nutrition, is there? That's why you're still hungry when you finish it. OK, Benjamin, let's go to you, shall we? We're staying with the NHS.
Yes.
This is the Health Secretary saying he privately admitting he must increase the pay offer to nurses.
Yeah, so they had the first nurses' strike ever, I think, and the suggestions that there could be months of disruption if they don't get a better pay offer. Now, they had one of, I think, 4.75%, which came best part of a year ago now that was suggested. Inflation is 10-11%, and so Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, is apparently accepting that he's going to have to put more money forward. Now, the challenge is that there really isn't much money going around at the moment, and the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has said that if he wants to increase the pay offer to nurses, it has to come out of the existing NHS budget. So I think a lot of people, and the polls reflect this, there was a poll yesterday that found twice as many people support the nurses going on strike as oppose it. So I think the public wants nurses to be paid better, but what services might go or what staff might lose their job altogether in order to find that money is the question.
Yeah, well, you think that he'd have to take it, Liz, out of capital budgets, right?
Well,
that's where they've been raiding capital budgets for a while now.
You can get rid of loads of staff at a stroke. You can get rid of the 3 diversity heads that are employed by every trust, over 125 trusts. You can get rid of all the layers and quangos, NHS England, NHS providers, NHS. Oh, there were 24 I listed the other day on Twitter. What gets me about the situation, whatever you think about who should get more and who should be got rid of, it's the government that being asked to deal with the unions. Now, in an organisation that actually spends more on management and non-clinical activity, what are those people doing? You know, you get people popping up. There was the head of, director of secondary care on the television last night. So he's above each individual clinical director of trusts, and there are so many of these jobs that overlap. So why can't there be somebody in NHS England, or even NHS providers, or any trust, or him, talk about hospitals, why can't they negotiate with the unions? What are they paid to do? I mean, what do they... The biggest thing is staffs. If they're not managing staff, and they're not managing decisions on what medications can be administered and what money can be spent on, because that's done by NICE and various other... I just wonder what all these people do.
Yeah.
And they're on huge salaries.
6-figure
salary,
yeah.
Over £100,000 each.
Well, I know somebody on nearly 200, but what the point is, why aren't they managing?
The person you know that's almost on 200, do you know what they do?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it might identify them.
No, I don't want you to identify them, but are they doing a job in the NHS? Or right, OK. So there are some who do.
It's a lot of nurses for 200k, isn't it? I mean, if a nurse is on £30,000, that's...
Well, if three diversity and inclusion managers at around 50 grand each, that's 150,000. So that's 5 nurses at current rates, isn't it?
I mean, I think the amount of money we're looking at, if you were to increase their pay, would be about £2 to £3 billion. So it's a lot of money that they have to find. And one of the challenges that, while I think most people support nurses getting paid a bit more at the moment, is that you now have 100,000 civil servants that are going to go on strike, and GPs are balloting for going on strike. And so the question is, if they give junior doctors, if they give the nurses the pay rise, well, then you're going to have lots of other people employed in the public sector, some of whom are also facing really hard times right now, who will say, why aren't we getting this money? And I think that's when it becomes a super expensive bill for the Chancellor.
Liz, you wanted to talk about the Brits?
Yeah, there's...
As in the awards, not the people.
Yeah, it's a huge... it's a huge mess. It's so woke. They were going to scrap gender titles for the awards. In other words, get rid of best male artist, get rid of best female artist. Gender's irrelevant. You know, we're all equal. We shouldn't differentiate between men and women. So what's happened? The first Brits, 2023, where there is no best male and best female artist, there's just best artist, and all the nominees are men.
Oh.
What's he called? I'm not sure what he...
Sam Smith.
Yeah, what he decides on a daily basis.
Sam identifies as they, them, but I don't think they're nominated, so...
Oh, right, okay.
But that was one, as far as I'm aware, that was one of the suggestions, was that you have people like Demi Lovato, the American singer, or Sam Smith, who say that, who don't identify as male or female, which, by the way, isn't the newest thing in the world. David Bowie, 50 years ago, was saying what we would now use the term non-binary, not male or female.
Okay.
And so the question was, you know, what do you do if those people are nominated for an award? I think no one's going to celebrate the fact that it's 5 men. You know, that doesn't look like a good example, but then who are the people making the decision of who's nominated?
Yeah.
You know, how does it get to the point where you have only 5 men nominated, even if you have that system?
Well, each individual, there's about 12 judges. They all choose their individual, not people who nominate, and they all choose their individual favourites, and then it's collated. So it's entirely accidental, non-intentional. I suppose the big question is, does it matter?
That's what I was going to ask,
Does it matter if they're all men, if they're the best? But then you get somebody like Adele, who doesn't even get a look in. Well, should she get a look in because she's a woman? I would say, I personally don't think so. I think it should be on merit. But it's a dilemma.
Has she had any music out? I don't know.
I don't think that was in the last 12 months, or was it? But personally, I'd give Taylor Swift every award every year.
She should definitely be on that
Yeah,
list.
because she had a new album, didn't she?
She did.
And
She lives in London.
I love
She
Wet
does.
Leg, who were up for 4 awards, girl band with guitars. They're fantastic.
I don't know what they called.
Wet Leg.
Wet Leg.
Check them out.
Yeah, well, surely we would have seen this coming down the track, though. I mean, if you take away gender, the likelihood is it is going to be men, isn't it? I mean, that was always going to be the case.
But that was certainly a suggestion, and clearly having just men be nominated is an example of it. But you know what, you actually look at the best-selling artists in the world, in the West, they are quite consistently women in recent years. You know, Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, Adele, Beyonce, you know, Ed Sheeran's up there, but they are overwhelmingly female artists. And so, you know, maybe that shows that this system doesn't work, because how is it that none of these women that are outselling men by a mile at the moment get there? But, you know, I think the idea that people buy into male stars more than female is just not true. I think that's long changed.
Traditionally, there have been more men making popular music, but I can honestly say that having loved music since I was pop music since I was about 3 years old, I have never, including this week when I was dancing around the kitchen to my new speaker, I've never said, you know what, I think I'll listen to a female artist.
To balance the book.
Oh, I think I really need a male artist now. You don't do it, you just play the music that you like.
That you like, yeah.
So do you support this then, the gender-neutral awards, or do you like it the way it was?
In theory, I like best artists because it should be irrelevant.
Yeah.
As I said, I've never chosen or bought an album because of their sex at birth or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I mean, the thing is, when you have the charts every Friday, you know, there isn't a male chart and a female chart. There's just who's sold the most music.
Yeah.
And so why shouldn't the awards follow the same scheme?
Just before we let you both go, and it is on a similar theme of awards, what for you is the most important thing about the best pub?
Oh, yeah.
What's the one thing that a great pub for you has to have? Liz,
It doesn't smell of rancid old fat from chips.
Okay.
and a big log fire.
No grease smell and a log fire.
Yeah.
And you, Beth?
I like a big comfy armchair.
Yeah.
Ones like that. You know, I want to sit there and have a few red wines and preferably, I like to have a Sunday roast in a pub.
Right.
And so the good potatoes.
Yeah.
And decent wine as well. Because quite often...
Hang on, this is getting into quite a long list.
Pubs pride themselves on their beers,
Right,
don't
yeah.
they? And then they say, oh, can I have a white wine, please? Yeah, what have you got? Well, we've got white or red, and it's disgusting, and you know you're going to be sick.
We need an extensive list, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, Liz, Benjamin, great to have you with us, and you're going to be with us throughout the remainder of the programme as well.